The microphone feedback echoed across the ballroom as my daughter Chloe cleared her throat, holding the hand of her new wealthy husband, Julian. Over 200 wealthy guests looked up from their champagne glasses, waiting for her to introduce the man standing quietly at table 20 near the kitchen doors. I was wearing my best tailored suit, the one I saved for special occasions, holding a small wooden box wrapped in ribbon that contained everything I had built for her over 30 years. Chloe smiled brightly, scanned the high society crowd, and pointed her diamond-clad finger directly at me. She told the room that I was just an old neighbor who lived down the street during her childhood, someone who kindly looked after her when her family was busy. The room let out a polite laugh, and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces right there on the polished marble floor. I stood paralyzed, watching my own child deny my existence just to protect her fake image of growing up in elite luxury. But before I could walk out into the night, Julian suddenly grabbed the microphone from her hands, stopped the music, looked straight at me across the ballroom, and said, "Sir, they need to know who you really are. I spent my entire life working double shifts at the city shipyard, coming home with grease under my fingernails and calluses burning on my palms. When my wife passed away when Chloe was just 5 years old, I made a solemn promise to give my daughter every single opportunity the world had to offer. I skipped meals, wore shoes with holes in the soles, and mortgaged my tiny house twice over just to pay for her elite private schooling, her ballet lessons, and eventually her Ivy League tuition. I wanted her to feel confident among the children of diplomats and corporate executives, even if it meant I had to live on instant soup and cold water. As Chloe grew older, I began noticing a subtle change in how she treated me. Whenever her university friends dropped her off at our modest home, she would ask me to stay inside or pretend I was the landlord fixing the pipes. She was ashamed of my rough hands, my faded jacket, and the working-class neighborhood we lived in. I swallowed my pride every single time, telling myself that as long as she succeeded, my hurt feelings did not matter. When Chloe met Julian, a brilliant young architect from a prominent family, she started calling me less and less. Eventually, she told me that Julian came from old money and that his parents were extremely traditional about background and status. She begged me not to ruin her chances, convincing herself that if his family found out her father was a retired shipyard welder, they would reject her. Months passed without a word until a plain white invitation arrived in my mailbox for their grand wedding at the City Grand Resort. When I arrived at the venue, I realized I was seated at the very back, right next to the kitchen door and the catering service staff. I did not care about the table assignment because I was simply proud to see my daughter standing in her beautiful white dress. But when the time came for family acknowledgments, Chloe took the stage and completely wiped my existence away. She looked 200 aristocrats in the eye and called me a helpful old neighbor who used to watch her house. The silence that followed her statement was suffocating. I felt the pitying stares of the staff and the cold indifference of the wealthy crowd. My hands shook as I gripped the small wooden box in my coat pocket, containing the deed to a prime commercial property I had quietly invested in 40 years ago, now worth millions, which I intended to gift her as a wedding surprise. I turned on my heel, ready to slip out into the parking lot and leave her to her glamorous fake life forever. But Julian stepped forward, his face pale with anger and disbelief. He firmly pulled the microphone away from Chloe, whose smile instantly melted into pure panic. Julian looked directly into my eyes, across the long room, and declared into the speakers that he could not start a marriage built on a disgraceful lie. Julian revealed to the entire room that 3 years ago, before he ever met Chloe, he was a broke intern struggling to fund his final architectural blueprint. An anonymous benefactor had funded his entire senior project and paid off his medical bills when his mother fell ill. That benefactor was me, working through a local community foundation that I had set up using my modest real estate returns. Julian had recognized my name on the guest registry hours before the ceremony, but he had waited to see if Chloe would honor the man who had secretly built both of their futures. Julian looked at Chloe and told her that the man she called a neighbor was not only her self-sacrificing father, but also the sole reason Julian had a career, a company, and the very money she was so desperate to impress. The ballroom fell into dead silence as Chloe froze, her face draining of all color. She reached out to touch Julian's arm, but he took a step back, shaking his head in complete disappointment. She turned toward me, tears streaming down her face, stammering apologies and trying to explain that she only did it because she was afraid. I walked slowly up the aisle, placed the wooden box holding the $1 million property deed gently on the main table, and looked my daughter in the eyes. I told her that pride had stolen her heart and that true dignity is found in sacrifice, not status. Julian handed back his wedding ring, apologized to his family, and walked out of the hall right behind me, leaving Chloe standing alone in front of 200 guests who now knew the truth. Strong ending. Blood makes you related, but loyalty, sacrifice, and respect define your true family. Never erase the people who broke their backs to build the foundation you stand on today. Because when the truth comes out, no amount of wealth can buy back your character.